Okay, Rabbi, so why don't we get started? We're on Daf Kuf Lamed Hey Yomad Aleph. And yesterday we saw two Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan, each quoting their Rebbe Rabbi Yochanan in two opposite ways. One quoted Rabbi Yochanan as saying that a husband, even on his deathbed, is believed to say, I divorced my wife, and therefore she doesn't fall for Yibum because she's not my wife anymore. And the other Talmud quoted Rabbi Yochanan just the opposite, that his husband is not believed to say that he divorced his wife because we assume that if he had divorced her, this would be public information. So the Gemara tried to reconcile it by saying that maybe these two students are not contradicting each other. It just depends on what relevance in halacha this information has. If it's reflective on a past act of his wife, such as an accusation that she committed adultery, then a husband does not believe. But it's reflective of a future event, such as her falling for Yibum, then a husband would be believed because he has a migu. He could always write her a get now, or instruct to write her a get now if he so desired. And therefore he's believed. The Gemara then equivocates. That was the last thing that we saw yesterday. Perhaps that's not the way to reconcile the contradiction. And really one of the Talmidim just simply misquoted Rabbi Yochanan. And based on that, the Gemara had said, in the name of Rava, that chushla, that you have to be choshesh, that maybe in a situation like that where a man is on his deathbed, and he says, I already divorced my wife, and we have no knowledge of this, that really lechumro, she should be obligated to get chalitza before she can marry anyone else. That's where we're up to now, and we're about the 10th line of the Gemara. Hahu dahava muchzak lan delesle achi, va'amr bishas misa delesle achi. Guy's on his deathbed. Now, in the neighborhood, in the community, he's known as the guy who has no brother. We don't know that. No one knows that this fellow has a brother. This Yankel has a brother. And so, not only that, but before he passes away, he says, I want you to know that I have no brother, and therefore my wife will not fall for Yibum. So, what can we believe it because of the chazaka and because of his own testimony? So Amar Rav Yosef, my lechushla, chada demuchzak lan delesle achin, va'od ha'amar bishas misa delesle. So Rav Yosef says, why is it even a shaila? You got two very powerful indicators that the wife doesn't fall for Yibum. First of all, no one ever heard of him having a brother. And number two, he himself says he has no brother. So Amar le Abaye, ha'amri di'ika edem b'medina sayam diadi di'isle achi. So Abaye says, no, that wasn't the whole story. Part of the story is that there's a rumor that there are witnesses who actually met his brother in some faraway place in China, right? So that's the issue. The issue is no one ever knew that he had a brother, but all of a sudden there's this new piece of information as he's about to die, or maybe even after he died, that, hey, wait a minute, we just heard that someone knows that he has a brother, and we should maybe wait until we get testimony to corroborate that he has a brother or that he doesn't have a brother. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute, Hashta mihas halesnu, come on, lavhainu de Rabbi Chanina. But 1 second, all it is a rumor. There's no testimony that this fellow has a brother. Why should we even reckon with it based on what Rabbi Chanina taught? Da Amar Rabbi Chanina, Edem b'tzad aston v'te'aser, question mark? Rabbi Chanina was dealing with the case of a shavuya. A shavuya is a Jewish young lady who has been kidnapped by Gentile captors. Now, of course, what is the concern? Maybe, God forbid, she was violated, and therefore, upon her retrieval, she would not be permitted to marry a Kohen. So that's the shaila. If she herself testifies, or if someone else testifies, even a woman testifies, or one witness testifies on her behalf that she was not defiled, we accept that. Now that's a big kula. It's a big kula that we normally would require 2 witnesses, but in this situation, we don't require more than just one witness. Rabbi Chanina was dealing with a case where there were 0 witnesses that this woman was defiled, and on her own testimony she said, I was not defiled. But someone came along and said, but we heard that there's someone far away who can testify that she was defiled. Rabbi Chanina said, a faraway witness all the way in the north, probably the reason north, maybe it was Vikings, who knows, and who captured her, and why should we have to worry about that, says Rabbi Chanina? Unless you actually have testimony to the contrary, you can assume that she retains her status of being kosher to the kahuna. And you don't have to worry about some rumor that says that there's some faraway testimony. So the Gemara says, you see that Rabbi Chanina's makel over there. Why can't we make the same presumption over here? That just based on a rumor, since we had no previous knowledge of this man having a brother, and he himself said he had no brother, why isn't that sufficient to allow her to remarry? So Amar le Abaye, im hikalnu bishavuya nakal be'eshes ish. Abaye says it's no comparison. He says, in that situation, Rabbi Chanina was makel because the whole idea of a shavuya to begin with is grounds for leniency, because in general there's a chazaka that Jewish girls will never allow themselves to be violated. They'll do whatever it takes to prevent themselves from being violated. And that's the reason why, that is, until we have actual tangible testimony to the contrary, we always assume that she has remained pure. But over here you're dealing with a married woman, a woman who's falling potentially for chalitza. She's asr l'shuk. There's no chazaka that she's a muteris l'shuk over here. If anything, there's a chazaka to the contrary, because up until now she was a married woman. So based on that difference of opinion, difference of distinction in logic, Amarle Rav Rav Nasan bar Ami Chushla. So that based on that, Rav said that Abaye's got a good argument, and therefore you should be choshesh that in a situation where even there's a rumor that there's someone who knows that this decedent had a brother, you have to wait until you verify the facts. And either wait for that brother to be found and have her get chalitza, or verify that that rumor was a false rumor, and then she can remarry. Next, Ze achi eino nema. Remember that if a man, you have three brothers, let's say Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, and Ruvain says, hey, guess what? We have a third brother, a long-lost brother. His name is Levi. And Shimon says, I don't know what you're talking about. I never heard of such a guy. So what's the halacha? So we said that based on Ruvain's own testimony, if let's say there are 3 acres in the estate, Ruvain says each one of us should only get 1 acre. And Shimon says, I don't know what you're talking about. I never heard of a third brother. So therefore, Reuven, based on his own testimony, has to relinquish half of the 1.5 acres that he receives. But Shimon doesn't have to, because he doesn't corroborate that testimony. As far as he's concerned, Levi is not a brother. But then the Mishnah had said something that seems to contradict that. At the end of the Mishnah, it had said that if Levi, the alleged brother, accrues tremendous wealth before he dies, and then he has no heirs, and then he dies, so then not only does Reuven, who had said that he's my brother, share in that wealth, but even Shimon, who had denied it, also shares in the wealth. So the Gemara now says, V'idach mai ka'amri. So the question is like this. Reuven, we know, is testifying that Levi is our brother. What is Shimon saying? Ika amri achunahi hu amai yitolimo b'chelko b'sulo. He says, if Shimon is corroborating and saying, yes, Levi is our brother, then why does the Mishnah say that only Reuven has to relinquish a half acre? Why shouldn't Shimon also have to relinquish a half acre if he's admitting to that? So Ela de ka'amri lavachinu. So what's the alternative? That Reuven says Levi is our brother, and Shimon says, no, he's not. I never saw him before in my life. So if that's the case, then Ema Seifa. Then take a look at the next part of the Mishnah. Naflulo nechasami makam acher yirshu echavimo. That if Levi becomes a real success financially, and then he dies, then both Reuven and Shimon can split equally his wealth. But ha'amri le lavachunahu. How can that be? If Shimon said he's not my brother, how can he now claim that he is my brother? How can he change his tune? That's the Gemara's question. He already confirmed that he's not my brother. How can you now change it and say that he is my brother because it's to your advantage? So the Gemara answers, Lo tzricha de ka'amri ein anu yodin. The answer is that what Shimon said was, I don't know. Reuven says, well, I'm older than you, and I remember that our dad told us that we have a third brother. His name is Levi, and you were just a baby when I got this information. But he's our brother. And Shimon says, listen, I don't know anything about what you're talking about. I have no idea. So basically, Shimon's attitude is, if Levi can bring a raya that he's my brother, I'll happily share the Yerusha, my chelek of the Yerusha with him, and I'll give him a half an acre. But until that, I'm not required to, because there's no evidence, just based on your testimony, Reuven. That's not sufficient evidence for me to have to relinquish it. So, Amar Rava zosomeres manali biyadcha v'hala omer ina yodeya pater. But the Gemara now says, Rava says, wait a minute. According to what you're saying, that this is what our Mishnah is talking about, where Shimon is saying, Eini Yodeya, I don't know, you're essentially answering a question that is the source of tremendous debate in many places in Shas. Bori v'shema. It's basically, what happens if a guy Reuven goes over to Shimon and says, Shimon, you owe me $100. And Shimon says, I owe you $100? I don't know what you're talking about. Now, Shimon is not denying it. Shimon says, I have no idea whether I owe you $100 or not. I'm too busy to know. Bring me a raya and I'll pay you. And Reuven says, no, I know for a fact. So machlokas amoraim, whether bori v'shema, bori adif in that case, one opinion is that the fact that Reuven is so certain can compel Shimon in a court of law, unless he says definitively that he doesn't, he has to pay. But here we're saying, like the other opinion, which is that Shimon can say, I don't know whether I owe you or not, but you have no raya. Bring a raya and I'll pay you. But until you bring a raya, I don't have to pay you, even though I don't know.
Shvu wouldn't work.
What?
If his raya is, he'll make a shvu to say that he owes him money.
Normally, we don't take a shvua to be motzi. We only take a shvua. We only take a shvua to free ourselves from having to pay. We don't take a shvua to be motzi. Right? So that's not going to help. The only thing is that the Man Da'amar who says that Shimon doesn't have to pay says that Shimon has to take a shvuas hesis. He has to take a rabbinic shvua to swear that he really doesn't know. But he's still pater. The point is that you're basically saying you're going like one side of the machlokas, when in reality we know that it's a machlokas throughout Shas. How can we defend that other opinion that says that Shimon does have to pay if it's clear from our Mishnah that Shimon doesn't have to pay? So Abaya Omar la'olamema l'chachaya b'shayni hacha d'chamana la'acher biyadcha dami. So Abaya says it's different. I'll tell you why it's different. See, in that case that is debated throughout Shas, the claimant is a bari. He's making a definitive claim, and Shimon is saying, the defendant is saying, I don't know. That's a shema. That's where there's a machlokas, and therefore some say that he's chayif because bari v'shema, bari yadin. But in our situation, Levi, the alleged long-lost brother, is also saying, I don't know. In other words, Reuven says, Levi, you're our brother. You really are our brother. Shimon says, I don't know what you're talking about. And Levi says, I don't know what you're talking about. So Reuven has to relinquish a half acre to Levi based on his own testimony. But Levi vis-a-vis Shimon, it's Shema v'Shema. It's not Bori v'Shema. Levi doesn't know if he's a brother. Shimon doesn't know if he's a brother. And therefore Shimon can say, even though if you want to paskin Bori v'Shema, Bori Adif, but you're not a Bori, Levi, you're also a Shema. Shema v'Shema. There for sure you can't force me to pay. What are you going to say? Well, Reuven is a Bari. Reuven's not a party of interest in the claim between you and me. That he's claiming on your behalf, but if you don't know, then you can't say definitively that I owe you the money. Okay, let us go on. So the Bach changes the quote from the Mishnah to Naflu lo nechasami makam acher yirshu echav imo. So the Mishnah had said that in a situation where Levi dies, that in this situation where Shimon says, I don't know, Shimon is entitled to say, well, I didn't know that I owed him money, so therefore he has to bring a raya. But I also didn't know that whether he's my brother or not on the other side either, so I should be entitled to have a chelek of Levi's wealth. Because based on what you're saying, Reuven, you and I are the only heirs. So you're not. If you're going to take a chelek, then I'm entitled to take a chelek also. That's essentially what Shimon is claiming. But if Levi dies and Levi's whole estate is that half acre that Reuven gave him, so then that half acre goes back only to Reuven and obviously doesn't go to Shimon because based on Shimon if Shimon is going to inherit from him and it's his brother, well, Shimon should have given him a half acre. So Reuven can say to Shimon, you didn't give the half acre, so you don't get to take back the half acre that I gave him. Right? So the Gemara's question based on that is, Boy Rava, Shevach Sheshavchu Nechasa Me Eilehem Mahu. Let's say Levi dies, and the only asset that he has is that half acre that Reuven gave him from his chelek. Okay? But during the interim, let's say years transpired, that half acre has accrued in value tremendously. It's like, the Thornhill housing market. Right? It went up tremendously in value. So the question is, can Shimon say, Reuven, you're entitled to the original, let's say the half acre was worth $100,000 when you gave it to him. So you take back the $100,000. But now that half acre is worth $500,000. So you take the $100,000 and the remaining $400,000 in value, you and I should split. Or can Reuven say no? That accrual in value was based on that half acre that I gave him, so I get the whole half acre back. So which way would you look at it? How do you judge it? So the Gemara says, "B'shevach hamagia l'ksafim lo tiboilach d'chinafu lo nechasim mimakam acher dami." He says, if the reason why the half acre accrued in value is because Levi invested in the property, built something on it, planted on it, and that's why it's gone up in value, then that's no different from the acquisition of a new asset. And in that situation, clearly Reuven and Shimon would split that, because that's not the original item. What the improvement that Levi made to the property is not based on the original gift that Reuven gave him, but rather is based on his own after the fact investment. So that Shimon can claim that Reuven and I split. But the question is, Kitiboilach b'shevach she'ena magia l'ksafim k'gon dikla va'olim ara va'aska shirton mai. The question would be, what if the property, that half acre, accrued in value without any effort on Levi's part at all? And the two examples that the Gemara gives is that, let's say the land that Reuven gave Levi had a tree on it. And that tree was just a sapling when he gave it to him, and on its own, just through natural growth, it grew into this huge tree that now bears fruit and is like an orchard, right? Or another example would be, he gave him a piece of land that was barren, and because of animal migration, there was so much fertilization of the property that it became fertile, but not because of any of Levi's efforts. Or, even though the Gemara doesn't say it, but you could argue maybe the same thing would be true of just real estate values shot up and went through the ceiling. That would also be a similar example where it's not through any effort of Levi. There was no investment in the property per se, and therefore you could argue that maybe it's solely Reuven's because it's the same property that I gave him. Or on the other hand, no, it's accrued in value, so Shimon should be entitled to split the accrual. So the Gemara says, take. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. That's an unresolved question. If a person dies, and as they're going to do the tahara, they examine the body and they discover, hey, there's a piece of paper that's tied to his thigh. And on it says, I hereby wish for Ploni to receive my entire estate. So what's the halacha? That's called a daitiki. A daitiki is the last will and testament. But no one knew about it before. Rabbeinu Gershom says the chiddush here is that even though it's tied to his thigh, and no one else could have written it, because who's going to be able to tie something around his thigh, right? It's one, if you were to tell me that it was found on his bed next to him, so then that would certainly not be enforceable, because who knows who wrote that piece of paper. But here, when you know for sure that he wrote it, because it's attached to his thigh, what would be the din? So the Mishnah says it's not enforceable. Why? Because ein shtar la'achar misa. He says because you can't enforce a shtar after the death of the decedent. In other words, if the Ploni guy would have received the shtar and was kind of the shtar before the decedent died, so then he's kind of it b'matna shchiv meira. But if the shtar was not yet delivered to Ploni, even though it's clear from the shtar that it's the wish of the decedent for him to get that estate, but it's not actionable because the mechanism of kinyan did not work, and therefore Ploni does not get it. It's almost like if a guy writes a will, but doesn't have it notarized and signed. It doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. So the question, of course, is, well, what about the fact that a tzavoas shchiv meira, just the fact that a shchiv meira makes a declaration, is kimesura l'chenesuna dami, right? It's as if it's already been given over. So that's the point. The Rashbam explains like this. The verbal declaration of a shchiv meira counts in halacha as enacting a kinyan that upon his death the transfer takes place to whoever he wants to gift it to. But the fact that he didn't utilize that mechanism and instead wrote a shtar is an indication that he wanted the shtar to be the mechanism of kinyan. But because the shtar was not delivered in his lifetime, it can't work. Only the verbal declaration of a shchiv meira causes that transfer. But if he didn't make a verbal declaration and he wanted the shtar to be used, it doesn't work.
So if there were witnesses and he wrote this before he died,
doesn't make a difference, even if there are witnesses that he wrote it. But if he didn't make a verbal declaration in front of those witnesses, it's not usable. So the Gemara now says, let's see here. He says, Zicha ba la'acher bein min hayorshim bein she'enon min hayorshim dvarav kayonim. If, however, he gave the shtar to Ploni, then, before he died, then the shtar is actionable, and it doesn't matter whether this person is a legitimate heir or not. Even if it's a total stranger to the family, it's basically a matna shchiv meira, and it's like giving a gift. It's like gifting someone something immediately before your death to be activated upon my death, and therefore it's totally valid. So, and by the way, the Rashbam says that the phenomenon of a shchiv meira makes it as such that even though I only want it to take effect upon my death, it nevertheless works. It's a special accommodation for a shchiv meira, which would not be true for a bari. If a bari says, upon my death, I want the shtar to be activated and not a moment before, that wouldn't work because even if I give it to the guy, but I tell him I don't want the kinyan to take effect until my death, so then that's not going to work either. It has to take effect during my lifetime. By a shchiv meira, we make a special exception. That as long as I made a verbal declaration, or I give the shtar over to the fellow before I die, I want it to be active upon my death, that will work. So the Brisa now, I'm just speaking out what the Brisa is about to tell us. Tanu Rabbanan, Ezehi daitiki. What is the definition of a daitiki, which is the last will of a shchiv meira? Kol shekasav ba da tehe lemekam v'lihios. So it's almost like the Bryce is telling me that it's a contraction of the following statement, the word daitiki. This shall be the verification of my wishes, that I want my property to transfer over to Ploni upon my death. And it's not clear to me whether the word daitiki is from a foreign language and the Gemara is just using a play on words, or whether this was the actual invention of the word based on these words. Ve'ezihi matana.
He says it's Greek.
It's Greek. Okay, not surprising. Ve'ezahi matana, and what is the definition of a matana that a healthy person can make? So kol shekasav ba mehayom la'achar misa. The Brisa says that if he says the gift is effective today, but you shall not take active possession or a controlling possession of the property until my death. In other words, today you own the title, you hold title to the property, but I don't want you to take active possession of the property until I die. And that works even if a person is healthy. So ela mehayom la'achar misa hu dahavya matana me'achshav lo havya matana. So the Gemara says, I don't understand this last line of the Brisa. The only time a matana works is if you make it effective that it transfers today, but the person only has a controlling share upon death. You mean to tell me that if I give it to you outright and say it's totally yours from today, that's not a matana? So Amar Abaye hachi kamar. No. What the Brisa means is Ezohi matnas bori shehi kim matna shchiv meira delokani elala achar misa kol shekasba mehayom ola achar misa. No, Abaye says what the Brisa means to say is if a person is not a shchiv meira but he wants to create a gift that will have the same effect as the gift of a shchiv meira, how should he structure it? And the answer is he should say mehayom. Today you are hereby the title holder, and here's the shtar. It's your property. But the terms of the ownership of the kinyan are that you don't take control of the property until the day I die. Right. And that's the way you would structure it if you're not a shchiv meira, because because otherwise a shtar cannot be activated up after death.
So if taxes are accruing before the death, but after he's given the
Right.
the
So
shtar,
if his name, he has a kinyan haguf, so he would have to pay the taxes on it.
and what if we
Correct.
write it to say an hour before I die?
Yeah, that maybe that would be good. Yeah. So Yosef Rabba bar Rav Huna ba'achshadra devei Rav v'Yosef v'korma mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabba bar Rav Huna is at the portico of Rav, and he's sitting and stating the following statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And he says that Rabbi Yochanan stated that Shchiv meirash Omer kisvu tnu manu leploni umeis ein kosun v'nostin shema lo gomer lahaknoso ela bishtar ve'ein shtar la'achar misa. Here's Rabbi Yochanan's halacha. He says that if a shchiv meirah, instead of utilizing the normative accommodation to a shchiv meirah, which is a verbal declaration, he instead says, I want you to write a shtar for Ploni that he acquires my assets, and give him the shtar. If he died before they had a chance to give Ploni the shtar, even though we know that it was the wishes of the shchiv meirah, Ploni is not kaina. Why? Because the Shchiv Meirah specifically said, I'm not utilizing the accommodation of a Shchiv Meirah to make a verbal declaration. I want him only to acquire it upon getting the shtar. And since the shtar cannot be given after death, you can't create a kinyan after death, this mechanism will not work. So Amar Lahu Rebbe Elazar is Daharuba. Rebbe Elazar, when he heard this, his Rebbe being quoted, he said, be very careful in this halacha, meaning that I endorse what my Rebbe Rabbi Yochanan said. Rav Shizvi Amar, Rebbe Elazar Amra, va'amar lahu Rabbi Yochanan is doharuba. So Rav Shizvi says that's not how the story transpired. It wasn't that Rabbi Yochanan was quoted and Rebbe Elazar said, yeah, good gesagt. But rather it was Rebbe Elazar who said it, and Rabbi Yochanan, when he heard Rebbe Elazar say it, he said, good gesagt. He said, I hereby approve what Rebbe Elazar said. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Kavase de Rav Shizvi mistavra. Rav Shizvi's version of the story makes more sense because Iyamart Bishlama Rebbe Elazar Amra, it's the Rich Rabbi Yochanan le'asudei alei de Rebbe Elazar. Ele Iyamart Rabbi Yochanan Amra, it's the Rich Rebbe Elazar le'asudei alei de Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi, question mark. He says, because the first version of the story doesn't make any sense. He says, the second version is where Rabbi Elazar, the student, said something, and Rabbi Yochanan says, I hereby endorse what my Talmud said. That makes sense. But if Rabbi Yochanan had said something, was being quoted as saying something, why would Rabbi Elazar need to endorse it? Since when does a Talmud have to endorse the words of his Rebbe? Just the opposite. So therefore it must be like Rav Shizvi said, that it was stated initially by Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yochanan ratified it.
Rabbi Elazar ben Azari, right?
No, just Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar ben, this is a Rabbi Elazar ha'amora. Okay? Va'od, tashma.
Right.
And furthermore,
Right.
I'll prove to you that the Rebbe Elazar Amra. The Sholach Rabin Mishmei de Rebbe Avohu, because Rabin once sent a psak in the name of Rebbe Avohu, and he said, Havu Yodim Shesholach Rebbe Elazar Lagola Mishum Rabbeinu. He says, you should know that Rebbe Elazar once sent out a message to the diaspora in the name of our teacher, Rav, and he said, Shchiv meira sha'omer kisvu tenu manu leploni umeis ein kosven v'nostin shema lo gomer lahaknoso ela bishtar ve'en shtar la'achar misa. That this is what Rebbe Elazar said. He said that if a Shchiv meira says, I want Ploni to get a gift, write him a shtar and give it to him, if they didn't have a chance to write the shtar before the Shchiv meira died, they cannot execute the transfer, because you can't deliver a shtar after death. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Tibadek. And on that, Rabbi Yochanan said, it needs to be checked. Now, this is a little bit different from the previous statement that Rabbi Yochanan said, is Daharuba, be careful. Here it's Tibadek, which is a slightly different nuance, and that's what the Gemara is going to be questioning. What does Rabbi Yochanan mean to say when he says it needs to be checked? My Tibadek, what does that mean? Ki asa Rav Dimi Omar, daitiki mivateles daitiki. So Rav Dimi said two things. The first halacha is not relevant immediately to our discussion, but it's related to our discussion, which is that a second daitiki, a second will, can nullify the first will. What do we mean by that? A guy's on his deathbed. He writes a last will and testament that says, all of my assets go to Reuven. An hour later, he says, all of my assets go to Shimon. So the second one, which dated later, supersedes the first one. That's what we hold in common law today anyway, in Canadian law also. Whichever will is dated last is the authoritative will. So that's the first statement of Rav Dimi. And the reason why that's true is because the daitiki has no legal standing unless it's delivered upon death to the recipient. And since the Shchiv Meirah changed it before he died, therefore the first one is superseded by the second one. But here's the second statement, and this will clarify what Rabbi Yochanan meant when he said, check into this. Shchiv Meirah sha'amar kisvu utenu manu leploni umeis, rowan, im kimiyafis kocho kosvin, vim la vein kosvin. Rabbi Yochanan went to say that this needs to be clarified. He says, let's say a Shchiv Meirah says, write a shtar that Ploni receives all my assets. And before they wrote the shtar, he died. So it's not a slam dunk, like we said, that you can't act upon that that order of the Shchiv Meirah. It depends. What does it depend on? Let's ascertain, based on what we'll see in just a moment, whether he meant for his verbal declaration to be the mechanism of the gift, and the shtar was only meant to act as a verification, as evidence of the gift, or whether the decedent meant for the shtar to be the mechanism of kinyan, in which case it's not actionable. So those are the two possibilities. Rabbi Yochanan said, you have to ascertain, what did the Shchiv Meirah mean when he said, write a get that Ploni gets all my assets? Did he mean to say that my verbal declaration is the method that I want Ploni to get my assets, and therefore he gets it? And by the way, write a shtar as evidence. Or, in which case, even though he died before we wrote the shtar, it still works. Or did he mean to say that the shtar is the mechanism of the transfer, in which case, if we didn't write the shtar before he died, it's not going to work? So, how are we going to find out? We'll see. Masav Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel, Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel challenges the whole premise that if he said write a shtar, we can't act upon it if he died before we wrote the shtar, because it says Bori Sha'amar Kisvu Tnu Manu Leploni Umeis and Kosvin Benostin Ashchiv Meirah Kosvin Benostin. That the Brisa says that only if a person is perfectly healthy and he says write a shtar to transfer my assets to Ploni, and then he dies before we write the shtar, do we not act upon that request? But it sounds like that if a guy's a Shchiv Meirah, we could act upon it and deliver the shtar even post-mortem. How does it work? So hu mosiv lavu hu mefarik la b'miyafis kolcho. The answer is because that too is what Rabbi Yochanan was referring to. In a situation where it's clear from the context that the Shchiv Meirah's desire is that the verbal declaration should be the mechanism of transfer, and that the shtar is only for evidentiary purposes, so then it's perfectly fine. The gift goes through, and we write the shtar even after the Shchiv Meirah has died. So that's what the Bryce is talking about. So hechi dami miyafis kochos. The final question is, well, how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know whether the Shchiv Meirah wanted his verbal declaration to be the mechanism of transfer, or whether the shtar should be the mechanism? So kida amar Rav Chisda v'kanina minei mosif al matnasada hachanami do amar af ksuvu v'chasumu v'havulei. So the answer is you have to take a look at the language that he uses. Later on, we're going to see an example. If a Shchiv Meirah says v'kanina minei mosif al matnasada, I want a kinyan to be additional to the gift that I am making to this fellow. Clearly what he means to say is, my verbal declaration is the gift. Period. Also, I would like to make a kinyan or a shtar in order to act above and beyond that for evidentiary purposes. And the same thing is here true. If he says, Af ksuvu b'chasumu v'havulei, I also want you to sign a shtar. In other words, he says, I want Ploni to get all my assets. And I would also like you to write a shtar. Then it's clear that doesn't mean for the shtar to be the mechanism, but rather just to be miyafis kocho, to provide added strength to Ploni so that he doesn't have to go and fight against the heirs in court, because he's got evidence. Confirmation. Itmar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel halacha kosvin v'nostin v'chein Amar Rav Nachman halacha kosvin v'nostin. And these Amoran say that's taka the halacha. look at the language that he used, and if through his language you can ascertain that he did not mean for the shtar to be the mechanism, but rather just as a confirmation of the verbal declaration, then you have every right to give him over the shtar. We'll hold it here for today. Anyone saying Kaddish?